This podcast is brought to you by eBiz Radio, the place to go if you want to know about the world of business and the business of the world. For daily podcast and article uploads, go to eBizRadio.com or follow us on Twitter at eBizRadioGlobal. My name is Nick Snow, and as always, for eBizTrends, I'm chatting to the one and only Dion Chang. Dion, thank you very much for taking the time once again to join me. Of course, on your radar for this edition, the rise of the gender-neutral generation. Of course, most notably in the news, Caitlyn Jenner, of course. It really got people thinking a lot about where we stand as a society today, and I think more than anything, how do we begin classifying people? I think that's really the biggest question. So once again, thank you very much for joining me. Dispel some of this massive confusion I think a lot of people have.
Yeah, hi Nick, and thanks very much for having me again. A slightly different but very, very sort of interesting trend topic, about this. And, it wasn't only, the introduction, the very spectacular and strategic introduction of Caitlyn Jenner to the world. But when I started looking at this thing, because, at Flux Trends, we've actually been tracking this for almost about 2 years already. And while it sort of seems to have culminated in Caitlyn Jenner, her sort of introduction to the world, there's been a lot of stuff that's been steadily bubbling under for quite a while. And in fact, a lot of the listeners won't have realized that actually a month before this announcement by Caitlyn Jenner and the Vanity Fair cover, the Oxford English Dictionary already decided to add the honorific MX to sit alongside Mr., Mrs., Miss, and Ms. Because they said there seems to be this trend happening. So MX, pronounced mix, is going to be for transgender people or for people who don't really want to classify their gender, which is quite a radical move, for something that everyone looks at the Oxford English Dictionary as what slang has become mainstream, all of those kind of things. So for them to say that they're adding this honorific as part of the sort of the contemporary lexicon, is quite a move. But then what I found out was that quite a few banks and some government agencies in the UK have already started offering their customers the gender neutral option. So you are allowed to put on just not a Mr. or Mrs. but a mix. Joe blogs or Jane blogs, and have yourself titled that way. When I say it's been bubbling up for quite a while, there's been a lot of incidents. So, last year, Laverne Cox, also transgender actor, was the first transgender actor to be nominated for an Emmy,
for Orange is the New Black.
Plays, Orange is the New Black. But what really, really surprised me, and I think this is quite pivotal, the Bradley Manning, the soldier who leaked classified information to WikiLeaks at the sort of same time around Edward Snowden, is serving a 35-year prison sentence. And shortly after sentencing, Manning announced that she's actually transgender and would be preferred to be referred as Chelsea Manning. So for the research for this trend column that I wrote, I just went back to that story, and I found out actually that in February this year, so everything sort of seems to be happening in the last beginning of 2015. The American military prison where she's been incarcerated made the groundbreaking policy of actually allowing her to have hormone treatment so that she can transition from male to female while she's serving 35 years in prison. And how that came about, and that's why I think it's really, really pivotal. Firstly, she sued the U.S. Army and said, I should have this treatment. And the Army doctors had already diagnosed her with gender dysphoria, and that's the condition of your emotional and your psychological identity doesn't match your biological sex.
Right.
So they said if the Army's own doctors have diagnosed that, surely she should get treatment. And when it was sort of put through to the courts, they actually said she was actually right, because if it's and they also pointed out that the American Psychological Association changed the definition of gender dysphoria from a disorder into a medical condition. So they said if an inmate has a heart attack or has heart problems and there's a medical condition, you would treat it. So this is no different, and therein lies the whole tipping point for me, is that if medically it is being reclassified on that level, then it kind of opens all the sluice gates. So it's very much like the American Supreme Court ruling recently about same-sex marriages that have to go through all states in America. You can't have one state that says yes and the other states no. So it's really starting to kind of gain ground. And I just think it's quite a remarkable, movement. And as Caitlyn Jenner observed, she said, the transgender issue is where sort of gay rights was 30 or 40 years ago, and I think this is just like the tipping point, and it's just going to sort of be propelled much faster, and just a really interesting shifting of social norms for me, which is obviously going to have a wider sort of ramification down the line.
I think overall, at the end of the day, what people are looking for is an opportunity to find themselves. I think we're living in a type of social construct where we are struggling to find our own personal direction. And of course, when finding one's own personal direction, one very often will kind of question who we are. And I think going straight along with that is, well, who am I, male or female? I think kind of guides us a lot in life. And once you know that, who am I in terms of my gender, whether I have one or not, it does provide one the train tracks to put on this train onto the rails to kind of go in that direction. Now, are we going to see a lot of people taking this opportunity to become gender neutral, or are we just going to be seeing specific groups of people such as transgenders taking this?
It's really been interesting because when I said Flux has been sort of tracking this already for about 2 years, we started picking up things of it happens in the fashion industry. So that's also next to technology. That's one of the sort of the second fastest drivers of change. So what happens in those kind of industries is not just for me the handbags and shoes, is about sort of social commentary and what happens. And there for a long time you've had this sort of very androgynous theme coming through. So that's not transgender. That's complete gender neutrality. And then, we also picked up, there's a little summer camp and just recently this year, a book has been published about it, but it's, in America, during summer, you kind of ship your kids off to summer camp. And there was one very, very specific one for, not even teenagers. So really, between, the ages of 7 to 10, 13, that kind of age group. And it's called the You Are You Camp. And it was created specifically for quite forward-thinking parents, obviously, but who have what they call gender-fluid children. So these are kids that aren't displaying the kind of social boxed-in of a boy should do this and a girl should do this, and these parents are allowing their kids to explore at that very, very young age and not kind of put those social pressures on them. So it's a really interesting sort of confluence of a lot of things. And then, even in Sweden, which is globally one of the sort of the pioneers of a gender neutral or a non-gender discrimination kind of society.
Yes.
They even have a gender-neutral pronoun. So, and there's schools and stuff that they'll run very much like the You Are You camp, where they just say we're not going to sort of put these gender stereotypes onto our children. So we're heading for a very interesting, I think, phase in history of where you're seeing it. I don't know where it's going to go, but I think just more acceptance and stuff going around. And I think obviously Caitlyn Jenner with social media plus digital era means it's going to be completely fast-tracked very, very quickly.
Well, I, for one, love the change, and I love the fact that people are embracing a different alternative to the societal norms that we're used to. But my biggest question for you, Dion, is this going to kind of develop into the next generation of things that we are allowed to change. For example, you said kids are being brought up in an idea where gender neutrality is okay. Surely religion is to follow, and then things like race. Why do I have to put my race on this page? And why does it say other? Why can I not just say, I'd rather not tell you because why should it matter?
Exactly. And when we first started tracking this, there was, it was about 2 years ago, there was, in fact, they were called, or they were labeled, should I say, the most politically correct parents in the world. And it was a couple in the UK who, to their friends and their family, did not disclose the sex of their newborn. So they said, we don't want to impose from the early age, so we're going to let this child grow up and see. And of course, it caused outrage amongst their circle of friends and the family and everything like that. But to your point, it's exactly where we're going. And if you start seeing, all the sort of race hate crimes happening, specifically, in America, the shootings, all of those kind of things, these sort of social issues are starting to bubble up and be questioned. And you're right, why should I put this down on a form if it doesn't have anything to do with my abilities or anything like that? So I think it's an interesting topic. And even in South Africa, then I was reminded that last year at UCT, University of Cape Town, they started providing the first gender-neutral toilets on campus as well. And so that was last year. So, like I said, it's been building up for quite a while, and we've reached this break point, and now it's going to be really interesting to see how and where this unfolds.
So tell me about the next few years. What are your expectations? Or rather, I shouldn't say expectations. What do you think will happen within industry, within the way that society is growing? What are your predictions for the next few years ahead of this trend?
Well, I think, in trends, there's always this kind of swing of the pendulum. And I think, on the one hand, it could be very liberating, and it could kind of ease the sort of either racial, gender kind of tensions that you see. On the other hand, it could also, which you sort of saw, say, a decade or so ago in America, where you go completely politically correct, and it becomes almost counterproductive when people get overly politically correct to be able to try and accommodate everybody. And as any politicians will tell you, you can't please everybody. So there's it could swing both ways. But if I look generally at trends, whether the technology trends or any other type of trends, we are in this really weird fork in the road where we just don't know. Hence we've discussed this quite often: the disruption, the disorder, all of that kind of in the world order, and we really are just kind of going into a new phase of a new world order, and we don't really know where it's going to settle. So for me, I sit and wait, and as it says on my business card, I observe, and I will be observing this.
Yes, indeed you do, and I'm sure you'll have many more insights for us as this develops, and of course different trains of thought that you will be introducing us to. But for now, it brings us to the end of this edition of eBizTrends. Dion, as always, a pleasure chatting to you here on eBiz Radio.
Thanks, Nick.